Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in all, and you are most welcome to this first leg of the autumn webcast series of the Experience Makers, where we aim to bring you insights, practical tips, and inspiration to help you advance your digital change. I'm Paul van Keken from Adobe, and in today's webcast we will welcome our strategic partner Nobi.Digital and our customer Ahold Delhaize, with whom we will discuss practical steps the Delhaize CRO teams follows to ensure they always deliver value through testing, and win some friends in the process, as you will hear from us. But first, let me introduce today's presenters that we have on. First of all, from Ahold Delhaize, we have Carlos Vicente Ruiz, who is managing the digital products. We have from Nobi.Digital, Greg Taylor. He is conversion rate optimization manager. And my colleague, Patrick Douwsma, who is data and platform specialist at Adobe. Well, we still have some people joining, some very short housekeeping instructions for this 100% live webinar to make sure you get most value out of it. So this webinar is expected to end at 10:45, so it will last like 45 minutes. The Q&A is at the end of the session, but feel free in the meantime to drop your questions in the pot for that. To take you to the brief agenda of today, we first start with Patrick Douwsma, who will talk about the market trends and business issues, and then Greg and Carlos will take over to talk about the steps they've taken to improve CRO and the testing at Ahold Delhaize. And then lastly, we've got the Q&A section, and for that I will be back with you. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Patrick Douwsma. Patrick, take it away for the introduction.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And yeah, I will take a couple of minutes of your time to actually set the stage for the case that Greg and Carlos will present to you guys. And I'll do that with sharing some numbers on the changes in consumer demand around personalization and optimization, and also the challenges that marketers face with these new demands. So we've done a study together with eConsultancy, Adobe, Accenture, and The Economist. And this is pre-COVID, where actually pre-COVID we already saw a huge peak in the demand for personalization. So if you look at the numbers, you see 60% actually expect real-time offers and also in store. Another 60% actually say they would like to receive online promotions while they consider products. And 70% actually say that the personalization that they receive today is actually quite superficial. And so with COVID-19 coming into play, this demand has only increased. We all saw that brands had to rethink their digital strategies in order to cater to these new demands and also be able to do that cross-channel. And so this new shift has even put more demand on marketers to adapt and to into personalization and optimization ways. And so from that study as well, we've noticed that 30% are actually not practicing any kind of personalization or optimization of any kind at that stage. And only 5% of them said that they were personalizing and testing very extensively. We also noticed within our clientele that the brands who did focus on personalization and optimization and really focused on the customer experience, they not only saw an uplift in their short-term KPIs, so top-line revenue growth, conversion rates, but also they saw improved retention rates and improved long-term value metrics like CLV metrics, for instance. And so what I would like to explain to you as well, these new challenges for these marketeers, we can classify them into 4 areas. One of them being your organization. So are we ready to start personalization? Are we ready to optimize? How are we going to democratize our optimization strategies? Who's going to decide on what optimization is running and what not? I think Greg and Carlos will touch upon this point in their case as well. The second pillar that actually is a challenge nowadays is the amount of data. We all know that we have a huge amount of behavioral data that we collect from web, app, mobile devices, but also IoT, in-store beacons, anything that is able to collect behavioral data. It can be used for optimization, but not only that part, but also bringing in profile attribute data that you have stored somewhere else. And think about like POS data, but data like second party data that you collect from a partner, your CRM data, and more of like profile attribute data that you want to bring together. And combining these data sets, you will be able to then improve your audience segments and improve your targeting by combining that data set and really having a holistic view. And so what data is right for your optimization? And then thirdly, on a process level, how have we embedded our processes for optimization in our organization? So have we really started talking to the right departments and have embedded some of their input into our processes, or are we actually on the step of more automating these processes and really having automated optimization processes? And the other aspect of this point is that you need to also not only look at your short-term KPIs, the ones I explained earlier, but also on your long-term KPIs for your processes. And lastly, the pillar that Adobe plays obviously a role in is the technology. So how well have you integrated your technology stack? So are you able to really have the data available and the technology available to cater to these consumer needs in real time across all your channels? And I think that's an important aspect, obviously, that Adobe can fill in. But really, how well is your technology stack integrated to be able to do this? And so this is a very short introduction, but we don't have a lot of time. I will now give it over to Greg and Carlos, who will explain in 3 simple steps how they delivered upon the CRO. Greg, take it away.
What I was saying to myself was, you mentioned, Patrick, that 30% of organizations are not doing any kind of personalization, optimization, and I find that shocking. And for today's call, for this chat, what I want to do is just assume we are all in that 30%. We are doing personalization, optimization. So let's just assume that you have, if you're listening to this call, you have a tool that allows you to run tests. Hopefully it's Target, but there are other tools. The important thing is that you are testing. My question for you, a rhetorical question, is it delivering you the value yet? And if it's not delivering value, which it might not be yet, what I really would encourage you not to do is to become disheartened. Because to be very honest, my experience with many different customers over a lot of years, that's the way it usually starts out. You usually start out with ad hoc testing, a test here, a test there, this KPI, that KPI, and it's very chaotic. Not saying it always has to be like that. There are ways to improve the process. That's what we want to talk about today. If we can focus on the process that you're following, it should be quite simple to move yourself up the maturity curve. And if you do that, the value starts to appear. And apart from the value, as I have in brackets there, CRO and everything you're doing suddenly becomes more appealing. Your colleagues realize that you can do something for them. You get friends along the way. So, to kick things off, this is a very, very out-of-the-box process diagram. Any optimization consultant could show you something similar. It's not rocket science. and I don't really intend to go into this in great detail. Happy to talk to anyone about it at length another time, but for today, all I really want to point out is this is where we started with delays, like we do with most customers. It's something very generic, it's something very best practice, it works well, but because it's out of the box, you need to customize this, you need to perfect it, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. 3 things that we tried to perfect to improve the value of CRO. So you can scan this, you can look at it, but very, very specifically, these are the 3 areas we want to talk about today. We want to talk about ideation, evaluation, and analysis to help you get more value out of your CRO.
All right, so we have a fantastic process, as you see. So what could possibly go wrong? I mean, everything is fine. We got Craig there, no problem. So is there anything that can go wrong? Indeed, if you show the figures, Craig, next slide. Figures are not great, as you can see, because we were like, okay, everything was fine. Why are we getting only 25% of implemented or acted on results of the test? 33% inconclusive outcomes, and 33% only actionable winners. So after seeing these figures, we were like, we have an issue, right? We need to check what is going wrong. And then we identified 3 main challenges. One is lack of relevance, short of volume, the second, and the third, missing insights. Let me explain a little bit about the first one, lack of relevance. So you can go to the next slide. If I can give you an advice here is test what matters to your stakeholders, not only what you think is a good test. Because we can have, and we had, a lot of good ideas, but if it's not what the business cares about, you might run into issues. And let me illustrate that with a little example. So we had a very good idea, basically, of a test. We had at the time at the Delhaize website pagination combined with infinite scroll. This is the version we had, and we wanted to test if using only pagination or using only infinite scroll will perform better, right? So we did the test. Maybe you can guess which one won, and the winner was B by 10%. We had 10% additional revenue per visitor, which was quite okay. I mean, it's a good result, something that you will implement, right? But in fact, well, no. If you go to the next slide, what happened is that stakeholders really, it's not that they didn't care, but it's they had other priorities. So they were not really interested in our test. They say, yeah, that's fine, but we have other priorities. We'd like to test that. And, well, yeah, it's nice. We'll put it on the list. We'll do it, but not now. So I think from the top of my head, it took 3 months to get this on production, all the changes, because there wasn't its priority. So again, try to test what matters to your stakeholders. But we had a solution for that, right, Greg?
Exactly, yes. So the problem was lack of relevance. That was the challenge. But I think a better way of thinking of this is that we just weren't listening well enough to what our stakeholders were expecting us to do for them. We weren't listening at the right time, and we could do a better job there. So we came back with 2 solutions focused on the ideation and evaluation tasks. The idea really, let's take it in 2 steps. First step was to start introducing an online form for our ideation process, because historically, probably like most of you, we would have ideation sessions every X months, possibly every 6 months, maybe 3 months if lucky, maybe yearly if very unlucky. And in those sessions, we would get together a group of people, usually the same people, We would come up with ideas, all good ideas, all interesting, all important at that moment. We would take them down, we'd have a backlog, and that would be what we would work from. But that has problems, because what we hear from that group of people is not necessarily the whole scope of testing out there. There are other people that were not in the meeting. There would be ideas that would come up after the meeting. So we thought, if we have an online form, if anyone can access it, they can complete it, and we have an up-to-date list of all the test ideas that are being suggested. Okay, so the form, you don't want to overwhelm people. If you ask them for too much, they don't complete it. If you ask them for too little, they give you far too much. You'll be overwhelmed immediately. So we need to guide them in some way. And we decided on 4 basic requirements. We needed to know from people on this form, what is it that we can help you fix? What is the problem that you have spotted? That's point number 1. Point number 2 would be some kind of an idea, okay, a suggestion. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Why don't we remove this? Why don't we hide that? Whatever the idea is, make it clear to us what you want us to do or what you think we should do. The third point, without being too demanding, is some kind of a hypothesis. What does that person think will happen if we implement their test? Do they think that by removing this banner, we'll create less distraction? Do they think by personalizing the banner, we'll create more motivation? What is it that they think will happen? And point number 4, the 4th must-have for this kind of form to work and not be overwhelming, is we need to know what is it that you believe success looks like. What are we trying to improve here? And if someone in the organization, not necessarily close to CRO, but someone in the organization has an idea and can answer those 4 questions and get their idea to us whenever, not necessarily in an ideation meeting, then that's extremely useful. We're always fresh with ideas. Now, if you open up ideas or ideation to everyone, as was the case with Lay's, I love this example because it's perfect for what we do. If you open up the ideation to everyone, you get some awful ideas. Let's not be too polite about it. You get some ideas that just don't make sense. I love cappuccino, but no way I'm eating those. So you have to be willing to take a risk. You get the bad, but you also get the genius, simply by opening up your process. The second part of the puzzle to try and improve the relevancy and listen better was to allow stakeholders access to our scoring system. Because when we receive an idea, we try and evaluate that idea to understand, is it near the top of the list or does it stay in the backlog? And we've got different ways of doing that. Here you can see 2 examples of 2 different scoring mechanisms. Again, they're online, so anyone can access them and they can add their own input. On the left, you've got a nice colourful example, which is all based on scores. So someone would come into that, they would go to a particular criteria. Usually this is me, but other teammates and other stakeholders get involved. We set a score. So the score could be something like the local priority is 10, it's maximal. Or it could be 0, not a priority at all. When we get all of that, the very important part is bullet number 2. We need local expertise. And in the case of Delhaize, I'm talking local because it's across different countries. But in your organization, it could be across different teams, different products, different sites, different devices, could be anything. But we want to know for that local expert, that local stakeholder, what is their priority for that test now? Not what it was 6 months ago, but now. Over point number 3, and on the right-hand side, you see a different type of scoring system that I prefer to use, and we've started using a bit more at Delhaize because it guides people. If you're just giving people a number to work from, whether it be 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, that's very relative. But if you give them specific questions to answer, so is this a local priority? Yes, no, absolutely, not at all. That helps get to a sum down at number 4, which is much more fair, is bias-free, and is far more useful. And hopefully, by combining this with accepting ideas at any time, we've suddenly improved our listening, and we've got a fresh understanding of what our stakeholders expect. And it looks something like this. Just as a very simple example, this is based on a true story. We have, and it happens often, we received an idea that was ranked as top 10, 10 points, must do this now, absolutely must happen. Next month, it dropped to 8. So it's still relevant, it's still interesting, but by the third month, which is not very long after we started talking about it, it's absolutely disappeared from relevancy. And if we don't have this mechanism of being able to update the scores and add ideas whenever, we would have missed that, and we would have tested that 3 months later and wasted effort and time.
Cool. So I hope this answered the solution of the first issue we were facing. So issue number 2 was short of volume. Let me explain you. If I can give you again an advice, is look for big numbers and be stubborn about it. I know we just advised you to listen to your business, but sometimes you need to say no if you're not sure you have enough traffic to reach a conclusion. So let's check an example. So that was on mobile, I remember, and a specific page on the wines alcohol section. And the problem was that you had an intro text for SEO reasons and explaining a little bit or expertise in there. It was in the beginning. So whenever you reach this page, you couldn't see the products. So many people were just going to other pages thinking, okay, there's nothing here. They didn't thought to scroll down or something. So we said, okay, we need to put it at the bottom. So we will see the products at the top. As soon as you hit the page, you will see the products. So we did our little test. Very good. We were getting some results. Experience B, as expected, was winning, but we couldn't reach a certain level of confidence. And checking the figures, we saw that only 140 conversions happened in a month, or measured in a month. We will have needed 127 weeks to reach the minimum sample size. So we could say statistically, this is okay, this is good. So the idea was good, but we will never reach a conclusion. So we need to avoid these kind of tests, or at least stop them very quickly, not to lose time. And Craig, you're going to explain how?
Exactly, yeah. So if we say that the problem was that we were short of volume, again, a different way to think about that is that we were going into tests without really being certain if that test was going to give us a conclusion. So was all of our effort, time and effort, was it going to get us something? In some occasions, it didn't. So we went back to think about it and decided again to come with 2 solutions to try and solve the problem. But basically the theme was we really needed to crunch our numbers. We really needed to do our homework. The first part of the puzzle is extremely simple, and it's a tool that Adobe provide. It's something, I'm sure we can put the link for this in the chat or we can share it somehow, but it's an online calculator which you should be looking at before you run a test, not after, but before. And the purpose of this is to try and understand, could this test idea, as interesting as it is, could this test idea reach a conclusion in a reasonable period of time? And it might look a little bit overwhelming, what's there, the information you need to provide, but it's pretty simple. So let me just walk you through this quite quickly. The first part, which is something you should not touch. I don't actually know why Adobe allow you to change this, but the point number 1 there, you've got something called confidence level and statistical power. They have their values set as 95 and 80. We won't go into this in too much detail because it's a lot of detail and that's for another day. But the point of those 2 boxes is to make sure that whatever conclusion you get at the end is reliable. If you were to change those numbers down the way, It would be easier to get a result that claims it's a fact, but it would be less likely to be reliable. So don't change those. That's my advice. Moving on to number 2, you put in there whatever your conversion rate is for your goal. So if it's a conversion rate, click-through, subscriptions, whatever, you go into your analytics or you do some kind of monitoring campaign beforehand, you put in what your baseline is. You say how many visitors you're going to have daily to the test. You say how many experiences you're going to have. So in this case, it's an A/B, but it could be whatever number you put in there represents the number of experiences. And now is the tricky part. Now it's the time to say, this test idea that I have, I believe that it's going to improve my key metric, let's say conversion rate, by 5% or 10% or whatever you choose, 15, 20, 25. You have to guess that. And this is almost impossible, okay? So don't feel too bad about guessing it and getting it wrong. But you have to be willing to put your ideas into groups. So low lift, mid lift, high lift. If you do that, the calculator itself tells you how many visitors you would need per offer for this test conclusion to be statistically significant, reliable. Okay, so in this case, it's a lot. It's 57,000, nearly 58,000 visitors per offer. Okay, if you then see that you're nowhere near that, maybe it's time to think again. If you're at it or over it, awesome, keep going. And what happens at the bottom is it tells you how many weeks this test would need to run. And as Carla said in the previous example, it's 127 weeks. We're never going to do that, or we should never do that. In this case, 34 weeks. I'm never going to do that either. That is a crazy length of time. So we're looking for tests that can run and conclude with minimum sample size in 4 weeks or less. I mean, that's for each organization to decide, but that's what we aim for. If you can do that, that little bit of homework might be a pain, but it will save you a much bigger pain later. Second part of the homework is while the test is actually running. And again, it's a calculator. Again, it's online. It's free. You can go in and play with this and figure out how your test is doing. But the purpose here is a little bit different. This is not before. This is during. And this is to help you understand, how is my test doing now? Does it need to keep running? Can I conclude it? Do I have to finish it? So again, we've got a calculator. You put in the same kind of information. On the right-hand side, you tell the calculator how many times you want to check that test during its run. Okay, and we all do this. We do this all the time. We dip into our testing tools like Target. We look at the reports and we say, wow, I've got 27% lift and I've got 99% confidence after day 2. Awesome, I'm great. But that's not the way to do it. That's a mistake. So we really need a tool like this to keep us straight and sane. We tell the tool all the basic ingredients it needs, again, like the baseline conversion rate, how many visitors, what we expect the lift to be. And on the right, we say, we're going to check this test 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. 10 times would be excessive. I think checking it 4 times in total is plenty. If it's going to be a test that runs less than 2 weeks, probably not worth checking at all, because no test should really run less than 2 weeks. 2 weeks is kind of the minimum. Don't run it less than that. So we've got our calculator set up. We come back for a little bit of a check here. On the left-hand side, you can see we have to put in some very simple information, how much traffic in each experience, how much conversion in each experience. And on the right-hand side, we get a graph that looks like this, which maybe doesn't make sense yet, but it's very simple, very intuitive. On the left-hand side, in the middle, the green line is telling us the performance of our experience. It's telling us that experience is doing well, doing okay, doing terribly. Okay, I'll put that into context in a second. At the top, in the kind of blue purpley line along the top, this is our line that if our experience green line crosses that, we have a winner and we can stop the test early. We don't need to keep running until we get the minimum sample size. We could stop it after 2 weeks or 3 weeks if we're lucky. At the bottom is the opposite side of the coin. we've got a line that tells us, if you cross that line, you are doing badly. Stop this experience immediately because it's not going to win. It's a loser. Okay, so here, in the case of this test, we can see in the very first check, 2.18. Don't worry about the number, just look at where it is on the graph. It looks very good. It's up near the top. I can imagine myself going into Target, looking at the result and thinking, awesome. But after the second check, which was after, I believe, 50% of conversion, it's gone way down. So really, that initial result was misleading because it hadn't had enough time to really measure the pattern of behavior. But after more visitors, more conversion, we see that this experience wasn't as good. And finally, if we check after the third check, we get this. We've crossed the bottom line. We've crossed the red line. So this is really useful for you because you have a guide that's not just your emotion. It's a reliable guide that tells you this test is winning, has a winner, is doing okay, keep it running, or stop it because it's a loser. So I think if you do those things, you've got a far better chance of running a test that will reach a conclusion and not wasting time and effort and ultimately delivering more value.
Right, that's good. I don't do the maths. Craig does it. Third point is missing insights. And that one, I have a very, very nice example for this one. So if I can, again, give you an advice, is be prepared to answer all relevant questions. Even if there's, at the beginning, they don't ask it. I mean it. I mean, in this case, I'm going to present, that was a very, very good example. So we had a discussion with marketing against e-commerce. I don't know if you're familiar with Nutri-Score. Well, Nutri-Score is kind of a letter that tells you, to put it very simply, if a product is healthy or unhealthy. A being a healthy product, E being an unhealthy product, right? And we put this Nutri-Score in all our products, so you know what you are eating. And I think it's a wonderful idea. And marketing wanted to take it to the next level and said, okay, we should have a kind of Nutri-Score swap system, so that will scan the customer basket, check for the unhealthy products, and suggest some healthier alternatives, so he can just swap. All right, so this is for brand perception. This is nice, and a customer can only love it. I mean, this is a fantastic thing. And of course, the e-commerce guys say, come on, guys, this is an obstacle to conversion. You imagine you're in the cart and then you need to swap products. Customer journey will be terrible. We will lose sales. That's no way. So at some point, we jumped in there and say, okay, you know what? Let's do a sanity check. We have the A/B test tool. We can A/B test and see if it's working. Now, we are not going to do it on the checkout because that could be tricky. But let's start maybe in the product page, and then if we see that that goes okay, we can check it also on the checkout. So we did the test, and this is experience B. You can see the little banner, so you get the product, and below the product you have the alternative, healthier alternative you can purchase. So we did the test, everything was right, and we get some results. So Greg? Yeah, so we have 8% click-through rate. All right, so good. We got some results. We're super happy and said, okay, here, guys, stop the discussion. We have something for you. You go to the next one. So here, those are the results. 8% click-through rate on banner. No negative conversion, no impact on the conversion. So fine, of course, you are switching one product for the other. Yes, visitors are interested because they are clicking on it, and it's not an obstacle, so that's cool. You can go ahead. And then I remember I had the e-com director coming to me, looking at me and say, that's fine, so what? I was like, oh, what do you mean, so what? Yeah, is it good? Is it bad? Is the same for all the segments? Is this the same for the new customers or the recurrent customers? and we couldn't answer because we didn't have data for that. So we had to find a solution, and I think we did, right, Craig?
Absolutely, and it's a very simple solution. It's the simplest of the three, I would say. We decided that our mistake was, as Carlos just pointed out, we weren't prepared to answer all the questions. Even if those questions hadn't been asked yet, or the stakeholder didn't even know that was a question, we weren't properly prepared. So we decided to make sure we were more flexible with reporting in future. That means, basically, we started working more and more with analytics as our reporting instead of target as our reporting. Both of them have good points, but the main feature in analytics reporting, so specifically Workspace, was that we could answer almost any question that would be asked, even if they hadn't told us that question before the test started. So in Workspace, for those that are not very familiar with it, we run the test, we look at the data in analytics, we build our own reports to suit what we need, and we can change it on the fly, we can look back the way, we can edit it. The main points are we can look at any segment, and that is such a luxury because with Target's awesome, but you do need to tell it what segments you want it to consider. So whatever your actionable segments are, you would tell Target, when you show me the report, I want these segments. And that's usually enough, but sometimes it's not. The Workspace gets around that. You can suddenly add a segment that hadn't been thought of. The second point is, like segments, any success event you can look at. It doesn't have to be the metrics that you declared in advance. If you suddenly decide afterwards that, you know what, I'm not interested really in checkouts. What I'm really interested in is orders, but I didn't include that. Well, now it's not an issue. Now it doesn't matter if you included it or not. You can pull it in on the fly. Third point is, and this is for people that love their data, if you really feel inclined to do so, you can dig as deep as you want. In most cases, it's enough to know by experience, by segment, by metric, but if you really want to dig deep and know what was, this person living in Wallonia on a Mac at 4 a.m. in the morning, how did they react? Well, if you want to do that, you can dig in there as much as you like. And point 4, which personally I find very useful, is you can look at the same data with multiple views. So if you're really focused on numbers, you can get the numbers. If you prefer to see it visually, you can get your graphs and your tables and your charts. It's all there. But the key piece to take from this is if that e-com director asks us, I was going to say a tricky question, but it really wasn't tricky, it was very obvious. If he asked the smart question, then we're ready for it the next time. And it means, when you go back to that e-com director, he doesn't need to know where the information came from, but now we can tell him, you've got your CVR, you've got your AOV, you've got your RPV, and whatever else you want to know, well, we've got that too. Just to give a little bit of extra information there very quickly, Workspace I'm particularly fond of because, as in this test, we're not just focused on the aggregate, you're focused on the segments. And just to give a little bit of a teaser there so you can go and play yourselves and dig in your own segments, we had 10% overall or 8% here, but it matters who you're looking at. So here it matters what did they buy. There's a big difference between juice and spreads. It matters where you live. There's a big difference in regions. If you ran this test in Target, you wouldn't get that insight. If you look at it in Workspace, it's there. It's just waiting for you to dig around.
All right, so we managed to tick the boxes, but the question is, did this make any difference? And yes, it did, because we have now 80% of tests implemented or acted on versus 25%. So it's a big leap forward. So 25% of inconclusive outcomes versus 33%, and 60% actionable winners versus 33%. And this figure is very interesting because when we look, as Craig said, at the aggregate result, we can really say we have a winner. But we can look into the different segments, and looking into these segments, you can you can see a winner. And this is also an opportunity to personalize the experience. I mean, let's imagine that you have an aggregate of plus 4% conversion lift. But when you look at a segment like new customers or current customers, new customers could be maybe 2%, but recurrent customers could be 8%, meaning that maybe globally I don't have a very nice result, but if I look only at the current customers, I do have a good result, and I can personalize. I can trigger the experience only for this segment of people, which is very good, of course. So just to recap, go next. So we have some on top of that some positive benefits. We have improved our figures, but we also have a positive impact with the stakeholders. Because now they understand what is A/B test. They are much more keen to work with it. We get much better ideas, a lot of ideas, some bad ideas, of course, but we get some genius ideas sometimes. They are more engaged in the process, and we collaborate much better with them. So before, at the beginning, it was a bit difficult, but now they are keen to listen to our ideas. They are keen just to suggest ideas. They are keen just to go for these results. So all in all, it's a very, very positive experience, and these changes really change the way we are working right now. So I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, the presentation, and well, if you have any question, we are here to answer.
Yes, thank you, Carlos and Greg, for your clear presentation. Very clear, in fact, because we haven't received many questions, but there's certainly one that came in via the pod, issued by Machteld, and that's a question to Patrick about his part. So Patrick, can you answer this question? So how can AI and machine learning make the life of the marketer easier when it comes to CRO and testing? Can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Great question. I think Greg already explained some of the features that Adobe Analytics would actually can bring to Adobe Target. But also inside of Adobe Target, there are some what we call within Adobe Sensei, our AI and machine learning, which is actually bringing data science more to the end user, more accessible. So for instance, within Target, you would have auto target would actually allow you to show an experiment winner not only to a segment but to an individual, actually looking if an experiment will make more sense to a specific individual instead of a segment. So that's one of the AI and machine learning that we have incorporated. Next to, for instance, algorithms to do content recommendations. So those are within Adobe Target, and I think within Adobe Analytics, the most powerful one, I think that Greg explained, was the ability to actually look in Adobe Analytics for new segments. So the ability to actually compare segments with each other and see what other experiments can you run next to the ones that you're already selected. So I think that's where some of the power of the integration of the two tool sets also really would benefit the market there. So I think that's, maybe that answers the question.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
Okay.
We've got some more questions coming in. I've got a question here from Delphine. Maybe Carlos or Greg, you can answer this one. So what are you doing with tests that are not statistically viable? Do you remove them, or do you keep them in backlog and reevaluate it later? So I think there's really like a very practical situation, practical question.
Yeah, I can answer that one. I'll take that one. And the short answer is it depends. It depends, the longer answer. If we see there's an opportunity to broaden the test, so for example, if we're running a test on a particular page and that page doesn't have the volumes that we need, if there are other pages, for example, product pages, category pages that we can spread out to get that critical mass, then we would consider doing it again. But if we see that simply it couldn't work, we would probably move on to something with a higher priority rather than spend a lot of time trying to resuscitate it.
Right.
Guys, I see that in the chat there is a question from Emmanuel that I think I can maybe answer very, very quickly.
Yes, please.
Is how testing is impacting design and IT capacity? Is it easy to control and measure? And of course, I expected this one. Yeah, well, it has an impact on design because sometimes you need to redesign the test. Like, for example, for the banner for the Nutri-Score, we didn't have design, so you need to do this design. So you need at least one designer, external or internal, just to do the test, well, the designs, the components for the test. When it comes to IT capacity, is very little because normally we do everything in Target and can be done quite easily. For more complex tests like the one from the Nutri-Score, when we need to access a database of products, then you might need a little help from your IT, but most of the time you don't need IT for that. And also easy to control, yes, of course, you get analytics. If you know a little bit of analytics, you can follow up a little bit and measure the same. You can follow on Target or analytics. I hope this answered your question.
I hope it did. So I'm looking at the clock. We run out of questions and we run out of time. So I would like to thank all the presenters here today and of course you as the audience for your attention and your questions. I want to remind you that this session is part of a series and our next session is on November 12th, where we're going to be hosting Colruyt together with the partner Multiminds, who both will talk about the setup of a solid foundation in order to manage any activation use case. To really optimize the customer experience, both online and offline. So we'd love to have you again and meet you again there, of course. Stay safe, bye for now, and thanks again to all the presenters for the contribution. Goodbye.